July 14th, 1943. The sweltering heat of New Guinea's northern coastline pressed down on the Allied forces like a physical weight as they advanced through a narrow jungle corridor. Captain Thomas Wilkins of the 93rd Infantry Division wiped his brow and squinted ahead, certain that his company was making excellent progress toward their objective without Japanese opposition. His intelligence reports suggested the area was clear for at least another 5 miles. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What would unfold over the next 72 hours would reveal how a 12-year-old local boy's unique whistle communication system would transform from a childhood game into the salvation of nearly 500 American soldiers caught in one of the Pacific Theater's most ingenious traps. "We're making good time, sir," First Lieutenant Harold Green remarked, consulting his map as the soldiers of Charlie Company trudged through the dense undergrowth. "At this pace, we should reach the rendezvous point by nightfall." "Excellent," Wilkins replied, though something about the unusual silence of the jungle made him uneasy. He was a veteran of the Guadalcanal campaign and had learned to trust his instincts. The 93rd Infantry Division was one of the few predominantly African-American combat units deployed to the Pacific, and Wilkins felt the constant pressure to prove his men's worth to the skeptical high command. "Sir, the scouts report the path ahead narrows significantly." Sergeant Major Isaiah Johnson approached, his uniform darkened with sweat. Johnson had been a schoolteacher from Georgia before the war, and his methodical attention to detail had saved lives on multiple occasions. "The terrain funnels through a ravine for about 300 yards before opening into a valley. Seems like the only viable route forward." Wilkins nodded, studying his maps again. "That matches our intelligence. The Japanese are supposedly concentrated 15 miles northeast. This route should keep us well clear." None of them noticed the small, thin figure watching them from the dense foliage 20 yards to their left. Amid the 500 men of Charlie and Delta companies, Private First Class Marcus Thompson served as one of the radio operators. At 19 years old, he was younger than most, but his technical aptitude had earned him the crucial role. His hands moved continuously over the radio equipment, ensuring communications remained operational in the punishing humidity. "Getting anything from battalion?" Wilkins asked, approaching Thompson's position. "Nothing but static, sir. The mountains are blocking most signals. I might get better reception once we reach higher ground." Sergeant Robert Williams, the company's most experienced jungle scout, materialized from the thick vegetation ahead. "Captain, there's something you should see." Williams led Wilkins and Thompson forward, where the jungle opened slightly. There, a small village of perhaps 15 huts stood, seemingly abandoned. "No signs of recent habitation," Williams explained. "But it doesn't look damaged either, more like everyone just left." Wilkins surveyed the scene cautiously. "Could be they fled when they heard us coming, or when someone else came through," Williams added quietly. As the officers debated, Private Thompson noticed a slight movement near one of the huts. He raised his hand slowly, pointing. "Sir, I think someone's there." Wilkins turned, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. "Show yourself," he called out. "We're Americans. We won't harm you." For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a small figure emerged from behind a hut. It was a boy, perhaps 12 years old, with dark skin and wide, frightened eyes. He wore only tattered shorts and clutched something in his right hand. "Just a child," Williams murmured. Wilkins approached slowly, hands visible. "Hello there. Do you understand English?" The boy regarded them warily, but nodded once. "My name is Captain Wilkins." "What's yours?" The boy hesitated, then spoke softly. "Katu. Katu. Can you tell us what happened here? Where is everyone?" The boy's eyes darted toward the jungle behind them, then back. "Japanese soldiers. Come 3 days ago. Everyone run to mountains." He pointed west, toward the distant highlands. "I stay. Watch." "You've been here alone for 3 days?" Thompson asked, impressed. Katu nodded, then opened his hand to reveal what he'd been holding, a small, intricately carved wooden whistle. "I listen. I call birds." He brought the whistle to his lips and blew a soft, complex series of notes that indeed sounded remarkably like a tropical bird call. From somewhere in the distance, an identical call answered. Wilkins and Williams exchanged glances. "Are there other children hiding out here?" Wilkins asked. "No soldiers," Katu said firmly. "Only Katu and friends." "We watch Japanese. Count them. Where they go." Wilkins felt a surge of interest. "You've been tracking the Japanese movements? Can you show me?" Katu nodded and gestured for them to follow him into one of the larger huts. Inside, to everyone's astonishment, the boy had created a crude but remarkably detailed map on the dirt floor using stones, twigs, and leaves. "This, our village," he explained, pointing to a central cluster of pebbles. "This river." He traced a line of blue stones. "Japanese here and here and here." He indicated several positions with red-colored leaves. Williams knelt down, studying the improvised map intently. "Sir, if I'm reading this correctly, these positions would put Japanese units on 3 sides of the ravine we're about to enter." A chill ran down Wilkins's spine despite the oppressive heat. "An ambush." Katu nodded solemnly. "Many Japanese. Come 7 days ago. Hide good. Wait." "How many?" Wilkins asked. Katu thought for a moment, then picked up a handful of small seeds and began placing them in groups. This many at river mouth. He set down perhaps 30 seeds. This many on hills, another 50 or so. This many in trees along path, nearly 100. "That's a company-sized force at least," Williams translated. "Sir, if we'd marched into that ravine, we'd have been slaughtered," Wilkins finished grimly. "But how do we know this information is accurate? The boy could be mistaken or—" Before he could finish, another bird call sounded from outside, distinct and complex. Katu's expression changed instantly. He grabbed his whistle and responded with a rapid sequence of notes. "What was that?" Thompson asked. "Teru," Katu replied. "My friend. He says more Japanese coming. From east. Many soldiers." As if to confirm his words, the distant sound of snapping branches and muffled voices reached them. Williams moved quickly to the hut entrance, peering out cautiously. "Movement in the trees about 300 yards out," he reported tensely. "Multiple figures, moving in formation." "Japanese patrol," Katu whispered. "They come every day. Look for Americans." Wilkins made a swift decision. "We need to pull back and warn the column. Thompson, try to raise battalion on the radio. Williams, gather the advance team. We're changing course." As they prepared to move, Katu tugged at Wilkins's sleeve. "I help," he said earnestly. "I know safe way. My friends and I, we have code." He held up his whistle again. "Different sounds mean different things. We can guide you." Wilkins hesitated, weighing the risk of trusting their 500 lives to a child's information against the danger they now faced. "Sir," Thompson interjected, "I couldn't raise battalion. We're cut off until we get to higher ground." That settled it. "All right, Katu, we'll follow your lead, but I'm sending scouts ahead to verify." The boy nodded solemnly. "Good. Japanese very tricky here." Within 20 minutes, the entire column had been redirected. Instead of proceeding through the ravine as planned, they began an arduous detour through denser jungle, guided by Katu and verified by Williams' scouts. Periodically, Katu would stop and produce complex whistle sequences, receiving answers from unseen allies hidden in the foliage around them. "How many friends do you have out there?" Thompson asked during one such exchange. "5, Katu replied. "All watching different places. All can whistle." "And the Japanese don't notice these bird calls?" Lieutenant Green asked skeptically. Katu smiled for the first time. "Many birds in jungle, many calls. Japanese not know which real, which not real." "It's actually brilliant," Thompson remarked. "A communication network the enemy can't distinguish from natural jungle sounds." As they progressed, Sergeant Johnson approached Wilkins. "Sir, the men are asking questions. Some are concerned about following a child's directions." Wilkins understood their reservations. "Tell them we've verified the Japanese presence ahead. We're not taking chances with an ambush." "Yes, sir," Johnson replied, though his expression remained troubled. "There's also talk about our unit being sent into a trap deliberately." Wilkins stiffened. He'd heard the whispers before. rumors that the predominantly black 93rd was being used as cannon fodder by white commanders. He'd fought against this perception, insisting that their deployment was based on tactical necessity rather than racial prejudice. But in moments like this, doubt crept in. "We follow the boys' route," he said firmly, "and we stay alert." As dusk approached, the column reached a ridge overlooking the valley they would have entered through the ravine. Using field glasses, Wilkins and his officers could clearly see what they had narrowly avoided: camouflaged positions on both sides of the ravine, perfect for an ambush. Even more disturbing, they spotted several Japanese units moving purposefully along their originally planned route. "They knew we were coming," Green whispered. "But how?" "Could be they intercepted communications," Johnson suggested, "or they have spies among the locals." Katu, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Japanese pay some villagers for information, promise food, medicine, but many lie to them, give wrong information." "And which group did your village belong to?" Wilkins asked directly. The boy met his gaze unflinchingly. "My father was killed by Japanese last year. My mother and sisters taken away, never seen again." His voice remained steady, but his eyes held a depth of pain that no child should know. "I help Americans because Japanese are enemies. All children who whistle, all lost family." The simplicity and tragedy of his explanation silenced the officers. As night fell, the column established a defensive perimeter on the ridge. Katu's network of young scouts provided ongoing intelligence through their remarkable whistle communication system. They reported Japanese patrols searching the original route throughout the night, growing increasingly frustrated at finding no trace of the American force they had expected to ambush. In the command tent, Wilkins gathered his officers to plan their next move. "We've avoided the trap, but now we have a different problem. The enemy knows we're in the area, and they're actively hunting us. We need to either complete our mission without being detected or prepare for a potential engagement." Lieutenant Green studied their maps. "According to our orders, we're supposed to secure the coastal approach to allow for landing craft in 3 days. If we can't go through the valley, we'll have to find another way," Wilkins finished. "Katu, is there another route to the coast that avoids Japanese positions?" The boy considered for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, harder path. Through swamp, many mosquitoes, maybe crocodiles. But Japanese not go there." Sergeant Johnson frowned. "Swampland will slow us considerably. We might miss our rendezvous." "Better late than never arriving at all," Williams countered. "I've seen what happens when a column walks into an ambush like the one they had planned." As the officers debated, Private Thompson had been working with his radio equipment, attempting to establish contact with headquarters. Suddenly, he straightened. "Sir, I've got a signal. Weak, but readable." Wilkins hurried to his side. "Patch me through." The transmission was fragmented, but the message was clear enough. Their mission parameters had changed. Instead of simply securing the coastal approach, they were now ordered to engage and neutralize the Japanese forces in the area to prevent them from reinforcing positions further north. "They want us to attack the very forces that were planning to ambush us," Wilkins summarized for his officers after the transmission ended. "With respect, sir, that's suicide," Lieutenant Green objected. "They outnumber us, and they hold superior positions." "Unless," Williams said thoughtfully, "we could turn the tables, use their own trap against them." All eyes turned to him as he continued, "They're expecting us to come through the ravine. What if we make them think that's still our plan, but approach from different directions instead?" Katu, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "I can help. My friends and I, we can make Japanese think you are coming one way, while you come another." "How would you manage that?" Johnson asked. "Whistles," the boy replied simply. "We make bird calls that sound like many men moving. Japanese will look there while you go elsewhere." Private Thompson nodded enthusiastically. "Decoys. It could work." Wilkins considered the audacious plan. "It's risky. These are children and we'd be putting them in danger." "We already in danger," Katu said matter-of-factly. "Every day, at least this way, we fight back." There was something in the boy's steady gaze that reminded Wilkins of the young men under his command, many barely out of their teens, all fighting in a war that had disrupted their lives and futures. The parallel was unmistakable. Both his soldiers and these local children had been thrust into warfare not of their making, both adapting and finding ways to resist. "All right," he decided. "We'll develop a plan using Katu's network as decoys, but with strict safety protocols. I want these boys well away from any actual fighting." Throughout the night, they refined their strategy. Katu's network of 5 friends would position themselves at strategic points around the Japanese forces at dawn, using their whistles to create the impression of American troops moving through the ravine as originally expected. Meanwhile, the actual force would split into 3 groups, approaching from unexpected directions to surround the ambushes. Before dawn, Katu gathered with his friends in the command tent to receive final instructions. Wilkins was struck by how young they all were. The oldest couldn't have been more than 14, the youngest perhaps 10. Yet they displayed a seriousness and understanding that spoke volumes about their experiences during the occupation. "You stay hidden at all times," Wilkins instructed them firmly. "Make your bird calls, then move to new positions. If you see Japanese soldiers approaching your location, you stop the signals and retreat immediately. Your job is to distract, not to engage. Understood?" The boys nodded solemnly. "Once the action begins, you all withdraw to this position," he continued, marking a spot on the map well behind their lines. "Private Rodriguez will be waiting there to escort you to safety." As the boys studied the map and committed the plan to memory, Private Thompson approached Katu. "I've been thinking about your whistle codes. How many different signals do you have?" 23, Katu replied proudly. "Different birds for different messages." Thompson whistled softly in appreciation. "That's impressive. Did you develop this system yourself?" "My grandfather taught me basic calls," the boy explained, "for hunting. After Japanese came, my friends and I added more, made them secret." "A resistance communication network," Thompson murmured, "created by children." As first light approached, tension mounted. The companies divided according to plan, with Wilkins leading the central force. Before they moved out, he gathered his officers for final instructions. "Remember, our objective is to neutralize the enemy force with minimal casualties on our side. We wait for Katu's network to draw their attention to the ravine, then we move simultaneously from 3 directions. Lieutenant Green will lead the eastern approach, Sergeant Johnson the western. I'll command the central thrust from the ridge. Questions?" There were none. The plan was clear, if daring. As the soldiers prepared to move out, Katu approached Wilkins one last time. "Captain," he said quietly, "there is something you should know." "What is it?" Wilkins asked, concerned by the boy's serious expression. "Japanese officer, the one in charge. He stays in my village chief's house. I hear him talk many times." Katu hesitated. "He knows about 93rd Division. Says Americans send black soldiers because—" The boy struggled with the words. "Because they're expendable?" Wilkins finished, his voice carefully neutral. Katu nodded uncomfortably. "He says trap will work, because your commanders don't send good maps, good information to black soldiers. Is this true?" Wilkins felt the question like a physical blow. Was there truth to it? Had his unit been sent into this area with deliberately incomplete intelligence? He thought of the maps that had shown no Japanese presence, the assurances that the route was clear. Coincidence or calculation? "Some people think that way," he answered carefully. "But they're wrong. My men are among the finest in the United States Army, and after today, everyone will know it." The boy studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. We show them all." As dawn broke over the jungle, the operation began. Katu and his friends moved into position around the ravine, their whistles creating the perfect illusion of a large force moving clumsily through the underbrush. From his observation point, Wilkins watched through binoculars as Japanese soldiers responded exactly as predicted, concentrating their forces to spring their ambush. "They're taking the bait," Williams whispered, "pulling forces from the flanks to strengthen the center." "Signal the companies to begin their approach," Wilkins ordered. Slow and silent. As Green and Johnson's forces began their stealthy advance around the enemy flanks, Wilkins kept his attention on the Japanese commanders, visible through his binoculars. They were focused entirely on the ravine, expecting easy prey to walk into their trap. The whistling continued, growing more convincing by the minute. Katu and his friends were masters of their craft, creating a sonic illusion of hundreds of men moving through the jungle. Occasionally, one would shake branches or disturb undergrowth to reinforce the deception visually. Private Thompson, who had remained with the command group, suddenly stiffened beside Wilkins. "Sir, look there," he pointed toward the eastern edge of the Japanese position. "That's not one of our units." Wilkins swung his binoculars to the indicated position and felt his blood run cold. A Japanese patrol was moving directly toward the area where one of Katu's friends was hidden. "They're sweeping the perimeter," he realized. "Standard precaution. If that boy is discovered..." The entire operation and the boy's life hung in the balance. Wilkins faced an impossible choice: signal for the attack to begin prematurely, potentially sacrificing the element of surprise, or wait and risk the child being captured. Before he could decide, something remarkable happened. The whistling from that sector changed subtly, taking on a different pattern. Within seconds, another whistle responded from a different direction, and the Japanese patrol suddenly turned, moving away from the hidden boy toward this new sound. "Incredible," Williams breathed. "They're coordinating, leading the patrol away." "These children have been playing this game of cat and mouse with the Japanese for months," Thompson realized. "They know exactly what they're doing." Wilkins felt a surge of admiration for Katu and his network of young scouts. Their courage and ingenuity were saving lives, not just their own, but potentially hundreds of American soldiers. The diversion continued for nearly an hour, with the Japanese forces growing increasingly concentrated around the ravine, expecting the American column to appear at any moment. Meanwhile, Green and Johnson's companies had nearly completed their encircling movement, approaching from directions the enemy had left relatively unguarded. "They're in position," Thompson reported, receiving the coded radio signal. "Awaiting your order." Wilkins took a deep breath, knowing that once the attack began, the young whistlers would be in increased danger. "Signal all units. Commence operation on my mark." He checked his watch, calculating the time needed for Katu and his friends to reach their extraction point. 3 minutes, he decided. Then we move. Thompson relayed the orders, and the companies prepared for action. The whistling continued, keeping the Japanese forces fixated on the ravine. "Sir," Williams said quietly, "no matter how this turns out, those boys deserve recognition for what they've done here." Wilkins nodded grimly. "If we survive this, I intend to make sure they receive it." Though he knew the reality, any official acknowledgement of their contribution would likely be minimized or erased entirely. The idea of crediting the salvation of American troops to local children, especially when those American troops were themselves marginalized within the military structure, would not align with the narrative many preferred. As the seconds ticked down, Wilkins studied the enemy positions once more. The Japanese commander had committed fully to the ravine ambush, exactly as they'd hoped. The deception had worked perfectly. 30 seconds, Thompson announced. "Signal the whistlers to withdraw," Wilkins ordered. The bird calls changed pattern one last time, a retreat signal understood only by Katu and his network. One by one, the whistles fell silent as the boys slipped away toward their extraction point. 10 seconds, Thompson counted down. Wilkins raised his hand, ready to give the signal that would launch their attack. In that moment, he thought of Katu's question about whether the 93rd had been deliberately sent into a trap. Whether true or not, what mattered now was that they had turned the situation to their advantage, with the help of locals who had chosen to ally with them despite the risks. "Mark!" Wilkins brought his hand down sharply. Thompson transmitted the signal, and simultaneously 3 American forces emerged from the jungle, catching the Japanese in a devastating crossfire. The ambushers had become the ambushed, their carefully laid trap transformed into a cage. As the operation unfolded, Wilkins kept one thought at the forefront of his mind. Somewhere in the jungle behind them, 6 brave boys were making their way to safety, having just written a remarkable chapter in the Pacific Campaign, one that would save hundreds of lives and alter the course of the battle for New Guinea's northern coast. Yet as the sounds of engagement erupted around them, he wondered how many would ever know the truth, that the salvation of 500 American soldiers had begun with a 12-year-old boy's whistle, cutting through the jungle air like a beacon of hope in humanity's darkest hour. The element of surprise proved devastating. The Japanese forces, positioned to spring their own trap, found themselves caught in a pincer movement they hadn't anticipated. Lieutenant Green's eastern contingent struck first, emerging from dense foliage where no American presence had been expected. Within seconds, Johnson's western force joined the engagement, creating a crossfire that threw the enemy into confusion. From his position on the ridge, Captain Wilkins watched the initial phase unfold with cautious optimism. The Japanese commanders were visibly stunned, scrambling to reorient their defenses against attacks coming from multiple directions. "It's working," Williams observed, his voice tense but controlled. "They're completely wrong-footed." "Signal the central force to advance," Wilkins ordered, knowing timing was now critical. "We need to drive through their center before they can reorganize." As the main American force began moving down from the ridge, Wilkins spared a thought for Katu and his friends. Were they safely away from the conflict zone? The success of the entire operation rested on the foundation those children had laid, and he silently promised that their contribution wouldn't be forgotten. Private Thompson maintained communications between the three American units, coordinating their movements as the battle evolved. Despite the initial advantage of surprise, the Japanese forces were disciplined and determined, quickly establishing defensive positions and mounting a fierce resistance. "Green reports heavy opposition on the eastern flank," Thompson relayed, requesting support. "Tell Johnson to send a squad to reinforce," Wilkins decided. "We need to maintain pressure on both flanks." The fighting intensified as the morning progressed. The jungle that had concealed their approach now became a challenging battlefield, with visibility limited to mere yards in many places. The sounds of the engagement echoed through the dense vegetation, creating a disorienting cacophony that made it difficult to judge distances or directions. Sergeant Isaiah Johnson led his men with measured confidence, maintaining formation despite the challenging terrain. As a former schoolteacher, he applied the same methodical approach to warfare that he had to education, breaking complex problems into manageable components and addressing each systematically. "Keep advancing," he instructed his platoon leaders. "Don't let them consolidate." On the eastern flank, Lieutenant Green faced mounting pressure as the Japanese forces rallied. A veteran of North African campaigns before being transferred to the Pacific, Green had developed an intuitive understanding of battlefield momentum. "They're trying to turn our flank," he realized, observing the enemy movements. "Signal Wilkins. We need to adjust our position." As the battle reached its second hour, the initial American advantage began to wane. The Japanese forces, though surprised, were numerous and well-equipped. They had begun to adapt to the situation, mounting coordinated counterattacks that tested the Americans' lines. "Sir, Johnson reports they're being pushed back on the western approach," Thompson informed Wilkins, his expression grave. "And Green says they've encountered a reinforced position with multiple machine gun emplacements." Wilkins studied the situation through his field glasses. The operation was at a critical juncture. They had disrupted the enemy's trap, but hadn't yet secured a decisive advantage. If the Japanese forces managed to reorganize completely, the Americans could find themselves in a prolonged engagement with uncertain outcome. "We need to locate their command post," Wilkins decided. "Cut the head off the snake." Williams nodded in agreement. According to Katu, their commander was using the village chief's house as headquarters, which would put him approximately here, Wilkins indicated on the map. "Behind their main line, but accessible if we can punch through the center." It was a bold strategy, but potentially decisive. If they could neutralize the Japanese command structure, the entire enemy force might disintegrate into uncoordinated resistance that could be overcome systematically. "Signal Green and Johnson to increase pressure on the flanks," Wilkins instructed. "Draw their attention and resources away from the center. I'll lead a strike team through the middle directly toward their command post." Thompson relayed the orders, and the American forces adjusted their approach accordingly. Green and Johnson committed their reserves to frontal assaults that forced the Japanese to reinforce their flanks, creating the opportunity Wilkins needed. Selecting a team of 20 experienced soldiers, Wilkins prepared for the thrust through the enemy center. As they gathered at the jump-off position, he noticed Private Marcus Thompson among them. "I thought you were manning communications," Wilkins said, surprised. "Corporal Davis has taken over, sir," Thompson replied. "I requested permission to join the strike team. I've memorized Katu's map of the village layout. I can guide us directly to the commander's position." Wilkins hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Very well, you'll take point alongside Williams." As they prepared to move out, distant thunder rumbled across the sky. The oppressive heat that had blanketed the jungle all morning was building toward afternoon storms, a regular occurrence in New Guinea's northern coastal regions. Soon, rain would complicate an already challenging battlefield. "Move fast, move quiet," Wilkins instructed his team. "We hit their command post, neutralize their leadership, and extract immediately. Clear?" 20 determined faces nodded in understanding. The central thrust began with calculated timing, coinciding with particularly aggressive pushes on both flanks that drew enemy attention outward. Wilkins's team slipped through a seam in the Japanese defenses, penetrating deep behind their front line before encountering significant resistance. 400 yards to the village," Thompson reported in a hushed voice as they navigated the dense undergrowth. "Bearing 275. The first raindrops began to fall, pattering against the broad jungle leaves overhead. Within minutes, the light shower intensified into a downpour that reduced visibility but also masked their sounds and movements. Wilkins signaled for the team to maintain their pace. The weather was an advantage they needed to exploit. As they approached the village perimeter, Williams halted the column with a raised hand. Ahead, through the curtain of rain, several Japanese soldiers were visible, hurrying between positions with an urgency that suggested disrupted communications. "They're messengers," Williams whispered. "Their radio network must be compromised by the storm." Wilkins saw the opportunity immediately. Even better, their command is operating blind. They skirted the patrol, continuing toward the village center where the chief's house stood. According to Katu's intelligence, this would be where the Japanese commander had established his headquarters. As they drew closer, the sound of agitated voices became audible even through the drumming rain. "That's it," Thompson confirmed, indicating a larger structure ahead. "The chief's house, 2 guards at the entrance, probably more inside." Wilkins assessed the situation quickly. The building was partially visible through the downpour, approximately 50 yards ahead. 2 guards stood under the overhang of the entrance, seeking shelter from the deluge while maintaining their watch. The windows were shuttered, but lamplight glowed from within, silhouetting several figures moving inside. "Williams, take 4 men around the back," Wilkins ordered. "Thompson, you're with me. We'll approach from the front. The rest of you establish a perimeter and be prepared to cover our withdrawal." The team separated according to plan, with Williams leading his group in a wide arc toward the rear of the building. Wilkins waited until they'd had sufficient time to get into position, then signaled for the frontal approach to begin. Using the rain and scattered huts as cover, Wilkins's group advanced to within 20 yards of the entrance. The guards remained focused outward, unaware of the Americans closing in from multiple directions. The assault was executed with precision that reflected months of jungle warfare experience. Williams' team neutralized the rear exit simultaneously with Wilkins' frontal approach, securing both entrances before the Japanese inside could organize a defense. Inside, they found exactly what they'd hoped for: the enemy command center with maps, communication equipment, and most importantly, the Japanese commander and his staff. The surprise was complete, resulting in the capture of vital intelligence along with the enemy leadership. "Secure the area," Wilkins ordered as his men took control of the building. "Thompson, check those maps. I want to know what else they have planned." As Thompson examined the captured documents, his expression shifted from concentration to shock. "Sir, you need to see this." Wilkins joined him at the map table, where Thompson indicated several marked positions extending along the coast for miles. "It's not just this ambush," Thompson explained. "They have similar positions established all along our planned advance route, multiple layers of traps within traps." Wilkins studied the maps with growing concern. The operation they'd just disrupted wasn't an isolated ambush, but part of a comprehensive strategy to decimate American forces attempting to secure the coastline. If we'd continued with our original orders, even after avoiding this first trap, we'd have walked into one after another, Thompson finished grimly. The entire division could have been systematically eliminated. Among the captured documents, they discovered communications revealing something even more disturbing. Japanese intelligence had indeed received advance notice of the 93rd's movements, including detailed route information. The source, however, wasn't racial prejudice within the American command as they had feared, but a compromised communication channel that had been intercepted by Japanese intelligence services. They've been reading some of our transmissions, Wilkins realized. That's how they knew exactly where to position their forces. This discovery had implications far beyond their immediate situation. If Japanese intelligence could intercept and decode certain American communications, countless operations throughout the Pacific Theater could be compromised. Williams approached with a captured journal. "Sir, there's something else you should see." The commander kept detailed records. He handed over a notebook filled with meticulous Japanese characters interspersed with English notes. From what I can make out, they were particularly interested in the 93rd. Wilkins flipped through the pages, understanding enough of the notations to grasp their significance. The Japanese commander had specifically targeted their unit, believing that eliminating one of the few predominantly African-American combat divisions would deal a significant psychological blow to American forces while reinforcing Japanese propaganda about racial divisions among their enemies. They understood something that many in our own command structure don't, Wilkins said quietly. The symbolic importance of our success or failure extends beyond simple military objectives. The rain continued to pour outside as Wilkins formulated their next move. With the Japanese command structure neutralized and vital intelligence in their possession, they needed to consolidate their advantage and communicate their findings to headquarters. "Signal Green and Johnson," he instructed Thompson. "Tell them we've secured the enemy command post and to begin convergence on our position. We'll establish a defensive perimeter here while we process this intelligence." As Thompson transmitted the orders, Wilkins addressed the remainder of his strike team. "Secure these documents. Everything gets transported back to division intelligence. Nothing stays behind." Within an hour, the American forces had consolidated around the village, transforming the former Japanese command center into their own operations base. The enemy forces, deprived of leadership and coordination, had fragmented into smaller units that were being systematically neutralized or forced to retreat. Lieutenant Green joined Wilkins in the command building, rainwater streaming from his helmet. "Eastern sector secure, sir. Johnson reports the western approach is nearly cleared as well." "Casualties?" Wilkins asked. "Lighter than expected. 17 wounded, 3 seriously. No confirmed fatalities yet." Wilkins nodded, relieved. The operation could have resulted in the annihilation of their entire force. Instead, they had achieved their objectives with minimal losses, a testament to adaptive planning and the crucial intelligence provided by Katu and his network. "What about the boy and his friends?" Wilkins asked. "Any word from the extraction point?" "All 6 accounted for and safe," Green confirmed. "Rodriguez has them at the rendezvous location as planned." As the afternoon progressed, the rain gradually subsided, leaving a steaming jungle bathed in slanting golden light. The Americans established a secure perimeter around the village, while communications specialists worked to re-establish contact with headquarters, using captured Japanese equipment to supplement their own. Sergeant Johnson coordinated the processing of prisoners and the collection of intelligence materials. His academic background proved invaluable, as he systematically categorized documents and equipment for transportation. "Some of these code books could be extremely valuable to our cryptanalysis units," he noted, carefully packaging a set of Japanese signal manuals. "And their tactical maps reveal positions all along the coastline that weren't on any of our intelligence reports." By evening, Thompson had managed to establish reliable communication with division headquarters. Wilkins prepared his initial report, emphasizing both the strategic significance of their discovery and the critical role played by the local children. "Without their warning and assistance, we would have suffered catastrophic casualties," he dictated, as Thompson transcribed. I am formally recommending commendation for the 6 local youths who provided essential intelligence and diversionary support. When the transmission was complete, Wilkins ordered Katu and his friends brought to the command center. The boys arrived looking simultaneously nervous and proud, their small frames dwarfed by the military activity surrounding them. "Captain," Katu greeted him with newfound confidence, "your plan worked." "Our plan," Wilkins corrected. "Without you and your friends, we would have walked into disaster." The boy shrugged modestly. "We help each other. This is how we survive." There was profound wisdom in that simple statement, a lesson about cooperation and mutual respect that transcended cultural differences and military objectives. Wilkins understood that what had happened here represented something more significant than a tactical victory. It demonstrated how shared humanity could overcome the artificial barriers created by prejudice and conflict. "I've recommended that all 6 of you receive formal recognition for your actions," Wilkins informed them. "And I've requested that resources be allocated to help rebuild your village and reunite scattered families." Katu translated for his friends, whose expressions brightened considerably at the news. Yet there was still a guardedness in their eyes. They had learned through harsh experience that promises from outsiders often went unfulfilled. "What happens now?" Katu asked pragmatically. "Now we secure this area and continue our mission along the coast," Wilkins explained. "But we'll be using the intelligence you helped us capture to avoid the other traps they had prepared." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "And my village? My people?" "We'll help locate them in the highlands where they fled," Wilkins promised. "Once the area is secure, they can return and rebuild with our assistance." That night, as the American forces consolidated their position and prepared for the next phase of operations, Private Thompson sought out Katu. He found the boy sitting outside the command building, expertly carving another small whistle from a piece of jungle wood. "I wanted to thank you," Thompson said, sitting beside him. "What you did today saved hundreds of lives." Katu continued carving, his small hands moving with surprising dexterity. "My grandfather said knowledge must be shared to have value." He tested the whistle, adjusting the sound hole slightly before continuing. "Japanese think because I am young, because I am small, I cannot fight, but there are many ways to fight." Thompson nodded in understanding. As a black soldier in a segregated military, he was intimately familiar with being underestimated and overlooked. "Sometimes the greatest power comes from being underestimated," he observed. "Yes," Katu agreed, his eyes reflecting wisdom beyond his years. "When people look at you but do not see you, you become invisible. And invisible people see everything." The next morning brought clear skies and renewed determination. With the immediate area secured and valuable intelligence in hand, Captain Wilkins prepared his companies to continue their coastal advance, now with a comprehensive understanding of Japanese positions and intentions. Before departing, he called a formation of all available personnel. 500 soldiers assembled in the village clearing, standing at attention as Wilkins addressed them. "Yesterday we achieved something remarkable," he began, his voice carrying across the assembled troops. "What was intended as our destruction became instead a significant victory. We disrupted enemy operations, captured vital intelligence, and did so with minimal casualties." He paused, gesturing for Katu and his friends to join him at the front of the formation. The 6 boys stepped forward somewhat shyly, clearly intimidated by the hundreds of uniformed soldiers facing them. "This success would not have been possible without the courage and ingenuity of these young men," Wilkins continued. "When they saw our column approaching danger, they could have remained hidden and safe. Instead, they risked their lives to warn us and then helped devise the strategy that turned the tables on our enemy." The soldiers of the 93rd regarded the small group of local boys with new understanding and respect. Many nodded in acknowledgement, some even offering salutes to the young civilians who had saved their lives. "I want every man here to remember this," Wilkins said firmly. "Victory doesn't always come from superior numbers or firepower. Sometimes it comes from unexpected alliances, from seeing value in those others overlook or dismiss." His words carried special significance for the men of the 93rd, who understood intimately what it meant to be undervalued and underestimated. The parallel between their experience as black soldiers and these local children, both groups dismissed as inconsequential by those in power, was not lost on anyone present. As we continue our mission, we'll be incorporating local knowledge into all our operations, Wilkins announced, and we'll be implementing a modified version of the whistle communication system that served us so well yesterday. At this, Katu's expression brightened considerably. Over the previous evening, he had worked with Thompson and the communications specialists to adapt his whistle codes for military application, creating a system that would allow American forces to coordinate movements using sounds indistinguishable from the natural jungle environment. Sergeant Johnson will oversee training in the new communication protocols, Wilkins continued. I expect every man to become proficient in basic whistle signals before we reach our next objective. As the formation dispersed to prepare for departure, Lieutenant Green approached Wilkins. The men are calling it Katu's Code, he reported with a smile. They're saying it's going to revolutionize jungle warfare communications. They might be right, Wilkins acknowledged. Sometimes the most effective innovations come from necessity rather than formal research and development. The following days saw the American forces advancing steadily along the coast, using their captured intelligence to avoid Japanese positions and strike selectively at vulnerable targets. Katu and his network of young scouts continued to provide invaluable assistance, expanding their operations to include additional local children who served as observers and messengers. The modified whistle communication system proved remarkably effective, allowing American units to coordinate complex movements without radio transmissions that might be intercepted. Japanese forces, unable to distinguish the coded whistles from natural jungle sounds, found themselves consistently outmaneuvered and surprised. 1 week after the initial engagement, the coastal objective had been secured with minimal American casualties. What had been planned as a costly frontal advance became instead a model of asymmetric warfare, with smaller forces successfully neutralizing larger, entrenched enemy positions through superior intelligence and innovative tactics. As promised, resources were allocated to help rebuild Katu's village and reunite displaced families. American engineering units assisted with construction, while medical personnel established a clinic to address the health needs of returning villagers. What emerged was more than just reconstruction. It was the foundation of a cooperative relationship that would continue throughout the remaining Pacific campaign. For Captain Thomas Wilkins and the men of the 93rd, the experience transformed their understanding of effective warfare and their own capabilities. The success they achieved, turning a potential massacre into a significant victory, demonstrated conclusively the value of adaptability, inclusivity, and respect for local knowledge. In his official after-action report, Wilkins wrote, "The salvation of this command and the successful completion of our mission can be directly attributed to the courage and ingenuity of 6 local boys who created and implemented a sophisticated communication system using natural sounds. Their contribution represents not merely tactical assistance, but a profound lesson in how underestimated individuals, when properly respected and incorporated, can provide decisive advantages in complex environments." Division headquarters initially received this assessment with skepticism. The idea that children with handmade whistles had played a pivotal role in a significant military operation seemed improbable at best. Yet the results were undeniable. The coastal objectives had been secured with minimal casualties, and valuable intelligence had been captured that benefited operations throughout the region. 2 months later, a small ceremony was held in the rebuilt village. Representatives from Allied Command presented Katu and his friends with specially created medals acknowledging their contribution to the campaign. It was a modest recognition compared to the lives they had saved, but it represented something significant, official acknowledgement that courage and innovation could come from the most unexpected sources. Private Thompson, who had been promoted to sergeant following the successful operation, stayed in contact with Katu throughout the remainder of the war. He helped document the whistle code system, which was adapted and implemented by several Allied units operating in jungle environments across the Pacific Theater. After the war, Thompson returned to visit the village, that had been rebuilt with American assistance. He found Katu, now 15, teaching a new generation of children the whistle codes, not for warfare but as a way to preserve their cultural heritage and remember a time when 6 boys with handmade instruments had changed the course of history in their small corner of the world. "You've become a teacher," Thompson observed as they walked through the thriving community. "Yes," Katu replied with quiet pride. "I teach the codes but also the story, how people from different places learn to listen to each other and work together." "That might be the most important lesson of all," Thompson acknowledged. In the years that followed, the story of Katu's code and how it saved 500 American soldiers became part of military law, taught in specialized courses on asymmetric warfare and the importance of cultural integration in military operations. Though never as widely known as major battles or famous generals, the incident represented something uniquely valuable, a case study in how victory often depends not on overwhelming force, but on the willingness to recognize wisdom and courage in unexpected places. For the veterans of the 93rd who had been part of that operation, the experience carried additional significance. As black soldiers serving in a segregated military during a time of profound racial division, they had directly experienced the cost of prejudice and the danger of underestimating others based on appearance or background. The lesson of Katu's whistle code, that those who are dismissed often develop unique strengths and perspectives, precisely because they must navigate a world that undervalues them, resonated deeply with their own experiences. Many of these veterans, returning to a still segregated America after the war, carried that lesson into their civilian lives and the emerging civil rights movement. They understood, having lived it, that recognition of shared humanity and respect for diverse contributions wasn't merely morally right, it was practically essential for success in a complex world. As for Captain Wilkins, he continued his military career after the war, eventually reaching the rank of colonel before retirement. Throughout his service, he maintained that the most valuable lesson he had learned in combat came not from academy training or official doctrine, but from a 12-year-old boy with a wooden whistle who understood that sometimes the most powerful strategy is to be underestimated by your opponent. In his retirement address at the Pentagon in 1967, Wilkins recalled the New Guinea campaign and specifically mentioned Katu's contribution. "In warfare, as in life," he told the assembled officers, "we often focus on technology, firepower, and numerical superiority. But I learned in a jungle in New Guinea that our greatest resource is human ingenuity, especially when we recognize it in those others might overlook. A child with a whistle saved 500 American lives because he was willing to help, and we were willing to listen. That lesson has guided my entire career, and I hope it will guide yours as well." Today, in military museums and special collections, a few examples of the original whistles carved by Katu and his friends are preserved alongside more conventional artifacts of World War II. Their simple wooden forms, precisely crafted to mimic specific bird calls while carrying coded information, represent a powerful reminder that innovation often comes from necessity and that wisdom can emerge from the most unexpected sources. The full story of how a black boy's whistle code saved 500 troops from a Japanese ambush remains one of the less familiar narratives of World War II. Yet for those who study unconventional warfare, cross-cultural cooperation, or the often overlooked contributions of local populations to military campaigns, it stands as a testament to the power of human connection across barriers of age, language, and culture, and to the profound truth that in our most challenging moments, salvation may come through the ingenuity and courage of those we least expect to help us. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.